This is Basket Case Clubs, CPR Group's podcast where we turn basket case clubs into showcase clubs. Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Basket Case Clubs. I'm Michael Connolly and I shall be your host for this episode. Joining me again is Steve Connolly. G'day, Stevie.
And I'm just here along for the ride. G'day. I have missed our chats. It's been a few weeks and I'm very much looking forward to having a chit chat about good and not so good handovers come AGM time, because we're coming into that time of year.
Yeah, we like to call it AGM season as we get into it. And it's because a lot of sporting organisations have their end of financial year kind of towards the end of the season. Then they get their books wrapped up and then they forget or neglect to get them to the auditor in time. And then they get back and then there's a mad scramble to have their AGM in time before everyone buggers off to summer sports. And of course, the same thing happens in March, April each year as well for the summer sports when they're trying to have their AGM. So there's 2 times each year where we get to talk a lot about AGMs, and we always find it exciting. It's funny, Steve, I don't know if I've told you the story about one day when I was heading out to a particularly, what was going to be, and it certainly was, a particularly rambunctious AGM, one of those ones where people don't know what to do, and you know, they're all friends, and then the meeting starts, and then they freaking hate each other's guts because there's a constitution that's going to be adopted and it's going to have this effect on this time. Well, so we perceive. And so I was explaining to him the shit fight that we were walking into. And he patted me on the shoulder. You know, he was, I think, 11 or 12 at the time. And he patted me on the shoulder and he said, "Well, Dad, you know, the good thing about AGMs, they only happen once a year."
No, you haven't told me that. That's great.
Of course, I then patted him straight back on his shoulder and said, "They only happen once a year for these clubs. But when you're me or when you're Steve, we get our fair share." So sometimes they go really well. And sometimes I think it's just because we're there. And you can tell when an AGM is going to be particularly contentious, because they're the ones where Steve or I will put on a tie and maybe even a suit just so that we look really important and scare people into behaving well.
These guys must know what.
Yeah, he's dressed well on a Saturday.
Pointy shoes and coat. Shit.
Oh, so there are some funny things about AGMs that I always enjoy a chance to talk about. So I'm going to do it again, Steve. When people at the start of the meeting, they're all friends and they chat, and then the meeting starts and they don't know how to behave for a general meeting because of its formality. That's also why we say a general meeting isn't a good way to meaningfully engage with members, because you bloody have this formality around it. You got to have having an agenda is good, but you got to keep formal minutes, and then you can't have anything discussed that wasn't on the notice of the meeting. So it kind of stifles innovative discussion or the opportunity for good things to be discussed, good ideas to be discussed at a general meeting.
You got to get enough people to turn up, which, unless there's something contentious happening, you might fail to do. You got to get your quorum. And isn't it funny how vastly different from one year to the next the AGM attendance is within a club where we've got nothing going on, it's all just business as usual and no one gives a crap. And then the next year we've got constitutions or name changes or, you know, exciting and big things happening, big change happening in a club, and all of a sudden everyone comes out of the woodwork and they've got to have their say, which is fine. You know, it's great to see democratic process within these clubs and associations with which we work, but it's certainly interesting that most of the time people don't care.
Yep. Yeah. Funny that. Or the other thing that can cause a lot of people to turn up is when all of a sudden there's a lot of money. So if there's been a sale, so say a golf club divests an asset by way of sale, and all of a sudden there's a heap of money in the bank, and everyone turns up hoping that they can rally around to have a vote to cut our membership fees. Good one, guys. That's exactly how good business works, isn't it? But then you get to the wonderful bit midway towards the end of the AGM where it's time for the elections. And the thing that I often say here is this is the part of the meeting where everyone gets intimately interested in their shoes. Whatever you do, just look down at the floor. Don't make eye contact with anyone. Don't make a sudden movement with your hands because it'll look like you're putting your hands up.
Might be seen as a nomination. Yeah, it's like when you're at an auction, you got to stay very, very still.
Sit on your hands if you don't want to bid. So then you get to the end of the meeting, and that's really what we want to talk about today. Is then you've had some new people, or sometimes all new people, join the committee or the board, and it's really important that clubs get the handover right. So one of the stories that I enjoy telling is a little emotional journey that I take people on us, and so we'll do it now. I want you to think about the worst handover you've ever had. So it might be on this committee, it might be on some other committee. So if you're listening and you're from a sports club, maybe it was when you're on a kindy committee or a PNC at school. And I want you to think about how bad the handover was. So what did you get? If you were lucky, you might have got a bag of crumpled up receipts and a coffee stained copy of the Constitution from 1991. And that's if you're lucky. Sometimes you get nothing. Sometimes you get a computer back wiped. Sometimes you get USB sticks. Now, I don't know about you, Steve, if your kids have brought home USB sticks from school and you're shaking the clothes out and you're hanging them on the line and tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. Oh, there it is again. I haven't discovered what that number is yet, but there is a number, a finite
limited number of washes.
times that a USB stick can go through the wash before it will no longer do its job. And so it might be that you get, oh yeah, here's the stuff. And some people, you can see them in a workshop scenario where people's faces are going red and they're thinking, yeah, those bastards, they just completely screwed it for us. And I push and I push. Think about how hard it was when you didn't have what you needed and you had to go and engage with government or with council and you didn't have what you needed because those bastards left you in a terrible way. Then I say, at that point where you're really angry about the handover, and it might have even been a hostile takeover, not a handover, that you had at the AGM, did you ever stop and think, maybe the first thing we should do is find all of those the people who were on the committee and go up to them and say, thank you. Thank you for the job that you did. We know that it takes a big effort to run a club. To be a volunteer in a club, to give up your time, to sometimes give up even seeing your kids play on the field to get stuff done for the club because of your love for the club. So regardless of how shitty the handover felt when you were going through it, because people are people first, before they're volunteers and before they're parents and participants, they're people and they deserve to be treated as people. And we often say that we've never met someone who got involved in a club committee or a club board for the purposes of ruining the club. Now, that's not to say that we don't know plenty of people who have completely ruined clubs, but in their opinion, they're doing the right thing. They're acting in the best interests of their organization. And so everyone deserves respect for that. So regardless of how shitty the handover felt, the one that you got, firstly, acknowledge the hard work of the people, regardless of if you don't like them. You don't have to like people to be able to share common goals or common objectives and work collaboratively together. But treat them as people first. Treat them with the respect that they deserve.
I think, sorry, just quickly to jump in there, I think it's important to keep in mind that there are a whole host of reasons that people do take a step back from committees. And often in our experience, it's because of burnout and people really through no fault of their own or through noble intentions of trying to do the best thing for their club, take too much on and hold on to their jobs and, for fear of giving it to someone else and them not doing as good a job as they can do. And we all have a breaking point, like the USB stick going through the washing machine. We all have a point at which we can't carry on. And often in my experience, I've seen that people who don't do the handover in the way that they should and don't make the lives of the new volunteers taking on the roles as easy as they otherwise could, it's because they're buggered. They're just completely cactus and they've got nothing left to give. And their business might be suffering, their relationship might be suffering, that relationship with their spouse or partner or kids. So again, like you say, just treating those people as people and saying thank you is reasonable in that regard, that those people have probably or possibly given a hell of a lot over what's sometimes decades of contributing as a volunteer, and then by the time they get to burnout, they might have just hit their limit, like the wet USB stick.
Or hit the wall. Yeah, so really what we're hoping is that by having this discussion, it will encourage people to start a committee succession and handover process, not when you're thinking of leaving, but when you begin.
Mm.
So the best succession starts when you start. It doesn't start when you end. And that's something that really good leaders know naturally. But remember that leadership is a skill that is learnable. You don't have to be a born leader. And in fact, that's what all the research is showing, that leadership is a series of skills that are learnable. And so this is a great one to just start now. So whether you've been involved for a decade, a year, a month, a week, or a day, there's no better time to start your succession for you not being there than now. And remembering also that there's actually no benefit in stretching out your time on a committee beyond your use by date. And that might not be that you've given up all that you can give, but there may be another leader who can get involved and learn it by being involved. So now what can clubs do, or what should clubs be doing, Steve, to be setting themselves up for really good handovers when they leave?
I think one of the first points is one, given our nerdiness, that we often harp on quite a lot about, which is creating a digital repository, not suppository, as I made the mistake recently during a webinar of saying, and just had to own it and, openly laughed at myself. Because, when you say to yourself in your head, don't say suppository, don't say suppository, don't say suppository.
Oh, so I'm sorry to hear that, Steve. That's a real pain in the ass.
Build an online repository where all of your important club documentation can be stored. Often we hear volunteers talk about the need for a club computer or, a club hard drive. And
club USB stick.
Club USB stick. Those days are kind of gone. And the world of cloud computing is so readily accessible now that some providers will offer up to some significant amounts of storage for online access for free, if not just pay a little bit for it. So we reckon.
Oh, and there are discounts, obviously, for not-for-profits.
Very good point. Yep, there certainly are. So initially, I think building that online repository so that you've got all of the club documentation. We're talking about obviously important documents like your constitutional rules. Then over time, you'll build more of an inventory of financial statements. And if you don't have a lot of this stuff digitally easily accessible, don't stress too much about going back retrospectively and combing through the archives to find this documentation, but just start now and build this inventory, like I say, of your constitution, your audited financials, your certificate of incorporation. So there are some documents like that you need to attach to funding applications. And rather than making your life difficult every time you prepare a grant by having to go and gather up all of those supporting documents,
Which filing cabinet is that in again?
Yeah, well, and then of course, so then clubs that do still rely on hard copy filing cabinets, a lot of them got cleared out in the 2011-12 floods. So,
and again in 17.
Yes,
depending
on where in the country you are. So don't rely on hard copies only anymore. I think that probably goes without saying in the world of 2021, but build up this toolbox that you can easily hand on to the next committee. And rather than having to, find all the files on your personal computer, and when it comes time for you to take a step back, when you might be burnt out and just need to step away and hand those over digitally or physically to the next person taking on your role or people taking on the committee roles, create this repository now and get all of those files readily accessible, where all you have to do is hand over a login ID and password. Get the new committee or the new person taking over from you to change that password in line with good governance practice, and straight away they've got access to all of that documentation. Now, obviously, when it comes to meeting minutes and asset registers, we will strongly recommend that clubs are subscribing to Meeting Track and Asset Track respectively, again, which means simply by virtue of a login ID and password handover, the new person or people have got access to all of that stuff, which is statutorily required. So, incorporated associations and other legal entities need to be keeping those documents. So for them to be readily accessible makes a hell of a lot of sense. So I think that's probably the first really easy step to tick off.
You made a really good point there when you said it was about good governance practice. I'm going to take it one step further and let everybody know that data security is everybody's concern. It's not just about big business, because you have access to people's personally identifiable information. So it is critical that you take this stuff seriously. And that's also why I mentioned you paying for services. Don't just go with the free ones. If they're subsidized, look, even if they weren't subsidized, you might pay $100 and something a year for access to cloud storage. But as soon as you're paying, the service level of the provider goes up. Now, if you want to go and have a look at Google's data banks, good luck, because you won't be allowed anywhere near them. The security of the actual data is obviously Google takes it incredibly seriously. Data breaches are serious, and that includes what even seems like very small. So 2 cases in just pre-COVID, so 2018, 2019, 2 football clubs that we know about, because we were working with them, was stung because of poor data security. So what happened very quickly is they had email addresses that were not secure. Now, it wasn't because anyone could crack 128 bits encryption. Not that I know what that means, but it's a high number, so it sounds scary. They didn't crack it. They just, the stupid, soggy, pink human on the end of the keyboard had a shitty password. And so they were able to crack into an email account. Oh, big deal. You got access to the club's emails. You can see who's bitching and moaning with each other. But what about the fact that you just troll through the sent items and the inbound, and you can see somebody said, can you send me this password again? And the dickheads did, and actually sent the password on email. And so finding to the bank, so then they could get into the bank and go and set up a payment. Oh yeah, but we got 2-factor authentication. So 2 people need to log in to the bank. Yep. So they then sent an email from the club's email account to President at, and how do I know who the president is? I'll just scroll through the sent items and the incoming items and say it's Martin. So, oh, hi, Martin. Oh, no, he uses the Marty. Hi, Marty. I've just set up this payment for $1,980. Can you please go in and authorize it? It's for sponsorship. Yeah, sure. And he went and did it. That happened again and again because the email was coming from the right place.
Yep.
It was only that one of them was a cybersecurity police officer that said on the second one, after whatever it was, 5,000 or 2,000 for whatever the first transfer was, said, hang on a minute, and rang the treasurer and said, I've authorized the first one. What was the second one for? You've authorized the first what? The first sponsorship payment. He said, I didn't send you an email. So boom, they then shut it down. But the other club got hit for $19,000. Now, this is the case closed 2 years ago. Guess how much of that $19,000 they ever saw? Yeah, that much.
About that much?
Yep, exactly. Yep. SFA is all they got back. So this is serious. And look, that's only money. That's okay. But you're also dealing with parents from split partnerships, kids on joint custody, where one parent isn't allowed access to the kids. So there is serious risks involved in exposing kids to those sorts of risks from a parent on a domestic violence order, for instance. Yeah. So the long and short of it is take this shit seriously. And if that means paying a little bit of money, just pay the money. And if you can't afford the money, why aren't you running a good enough business in the first place to be able to take this shit seriously?
It's a very good point.
Just let me step down off my high horse. There we go. Okay,
but that's just quickly. So that so often is a topic that we need to tackle head on, isn't it, Mick? Because this spending a little bit of money to just do the right thing, whether it's your financial management software, your asset maintenance software, or your data security, you can always make more money, whether you're a person, whether you're a club, whether you're a business. You can't ever get your time back. And we're talking about volunteers who invest their own time when they could be with their own kids or with their family or working to earn money to put food on their table. But instead, they're investing that time in their club. So invest in systems that make your lives easier. And importantly, in the context of today's discussion, invest in systems that make the lives of the next people easier so that you find it easier to get them on board in the first place.
It's also leverage, because although I'm going to invest money in a system that helps me do the job quicker, I'm not necessarily going to spend less time working for the club that I so dearly love. So the value of the work that I'm going to be giving when I'm not mucking around on data entry or finding the constitution in which drawer of which filing cabinet it was, hoping that it isn't brown mush at the mouth of the Bremer River that flooded, then that I'm going to be able to be working on strategic stuff instead of just looking over my shoulder at what we've done last year, last decade. We'll be able to be planning, looking into the future, budgeting, all of these things that drop off the bottom for clubs. That's how we'll be able to spend our time. So find all of the shitty things that you're doing that are a waste of time that you systemize at work. And sure, it's going to cost you a little bit. I thought you were also going to say, when you said that goes across everything, I was kicking a footy down at the local club near me yesterday, and there's a bit of tape on a falling down old bit of retaining wall. Now it's pretty serious, it's 75 by 200.
Hold on. Is
sleepers?
Is the tape there to alert you to the?
Yeah. It's not holding it up. Sticky tape. The tape has been in the sun for so long that it's rotting and falling down. Just freaking fix this shit, man. Like, why do you not run a good enough business to say that is a problem? That is going to make somebody's bum get splinters in it when they're trying to sit here and watch their kids. If a kid doesn't trip and fall on it or cut themselves badly, like it's a physical risk. And they just don't see it. The forest for the trees thing. Get somebody new in to come and say, hey, what does this club look like to you? And you look around and you go, well, it kind of looks like warts on a pig's bum, because of all this shit that gets developed over time. Anyway, off topic, back on topic. So succession. So yes, if you get that thing right though, Steve, how easy is everything else?
Yeah.
Because you've got the password, you've then got everything where it needs. It may be multiple systems, and that's okay because it's horses for courses. The finance package should have, yes, a different username and password. Thank you. Even if the same email address that is registered, definitely bespoke passwords for everything and strong passwords, or better yet, passphrases. So let's now get practical about at the time of the handover. So the incoming people now have access to everything. Let's talk through what you think are the most important things that the outgoing committee should be handing on to the incoming committee, or indeed a big role that we play is inducting incoming committee members. What are the things that we focus on to make that process nice and smooth?
One thing that often, I'll go kind of straight to the end, which is the things that often get missed and only rear their head down the track when volunteers are banging their head against a wall trying to subsequently or hurriedly sort things out. For instance, when we're submitting a funding application or entering into some new contractual agreement like a lease, which is to get on to the relevant external parties that need to know that a change has taken place. So some of that stuff happens through the annual return process, and the Office of Fair Trading will get your annual return within a month of your AGM if you're an incorporated association. Or, companies will obviously be reporting to ASIC, and you've got to. It's a requirement that you're submitting those reports and keeping the regulatory body under which you exist as a legal entity up to date. But what often drops off the bottom is the ATO. So not telling the ATO who our new contact person is. Council, if you access council managed or owned land, you're going to need to keep them informed as to what changes have taken place. Any other entities with you have contracts, so insurance providers, the bank, signatories on bank accounts. It's important that when you turn up to the bank to change your signatories and say, hey, this person or these people are no longer needing to be listed on the account because they're no longer on the committee and these new people need to get added, you're going to need to have proof that either at a general meeting, AGM, or at the first management or board meeting, management committee or board meeting after the AGM, that it has been agreed formally that those new people are going to be added as signatories. So there's some of the important things that we often see drop off the bottom. But then when it comes to the things that will ideally be in that online repository, so as I mentioned earlier, your constitution, your bylaws and other policies, certificate of incorporation, financial statements, meeting minutes in meeting track and asset register and asset track, other financial records and reports, bank statements and budgets and so on, so that new volunteers can build a bit of a historical understanding of how the club came to be in its current financial and broader position. If you've got any staff, obviously, contracts of employment and other records that surround that engagement. Grant documentation. The number of times that I've seen or worked with new volunteer management committees or boards who are trying to complete projects started by previous committees or boards and having no
What have they
data
got this
or
money in the bank for?
well, let's spend it.
Yeah,
And then they got to
party
spend it on the wrong
time.
thing. Got to give the
Yeah,
money
like a
back.
big
That
piss up.
sucks. Yep. So make sure that you're handing on any details of projects that have been completed recently, but obviously any projects that are running currently and that are going to need to be acquitted in the near future. Calendar of important dates. So, when do we need to have our jerseys ordered? When do we need to be sending out our notice of AGM? So some of that stuff is obviously going to be tied up in your constitution, bylaws, and other policies. Some of that stuff's just going to make sense based on when your sporting season happens, if you've got a sporting season. And we have a tool to make the lives of outgoing and incoming volunteers really easy on that calendar of important dates consideration. So Michael and I will give you a bit more info on that at the end of this discussion. And as you mentioned, Mick, really the induction training. So what we often see is a new volunteer management committee that have either very little or very different understanding across the group of them as to what it means to do good governance and how they should be running their club. So what is really important is that if at the outset, and this applies for new volunteers, but it also importantly applies for those people who've been around for many years and might have learnt, to do things the same old way.
Yeah, this is how it's always been done around here.
So then making change after that is quite difficult. So to run an induction and alignment session very soon after, if not even on the same day as the AGM, to get the new committee or board on the same page. And we work with an increasing number of clubs and associations to run this training. And invariably what we hear is that it means that new people can just hit the ground running. Only a couple of weeks ago, I ran an induction session for a new board member who was one of only two on a pretty big board that got elected in September last year. So it only took them, 10 or 11 months to organise their induction session for this guy. And admittedly, it is a 2-year term in office, so he's only coming to the end of his first year. But what he said was that the first 3 to 6 months of his tenure, he felt really lost. But more importantly, he felt as though he wasn't contributing real value to the club. And I thought that this was very telling in that he is a switched on guy so this is a golf club and he's come from the world of rugby league where he's spent a lot of time volunteering at both the club and league level. And therefore he's got a pretty good understanding of good governance in a not-for-profit setting. And nevertheless, he said, I felt like I was the newcomer in this board and I didn't know how things operated. And I really needed that 3 to 6 months to get my feet under the desk and to learn how this board operates. And only now, after, more like 10 or 11 months, do I feel as though I'm contributing real value. So obviously this is a shortcoming in that board induction session happening so long after his election, but it highlights the importance of getting an entire board on the same page. And when there's someone new to a board and maybe they're thrown in the mix, people who've been there for a very long time, if we get them into whether it's in the same room in which they normally meet somewhere else or online, obviously in the current environment, what it does is provide what this opportunity to be involved in a specific induction session does is it takes them out of their formal board or management committee meeting environment, takes away the mental limitations of having an agenda and having to stick within that, and enables people to speak very openly and to share their thoughts and feelings and to address them themselves, but also to get the support and buy-in of others on the board or management committee.
I just wanted that 3 to 6 months that then became 10 or 11 months. That in some ways is a little bit sad because it feels like there's a waste of that time. Now, it's okay to take time, and it might be 3 to 6 months. That's fine to find your place. You shouldn't have to take 3 to 6 months to find your feet.
Yes.
So what we're looking at by good induction and a timely induction is short-circuiting the process. So if you can take that 10 months and shrink it down to 3 months before you are actually adding value, even though it might take a little while to find. And I'm talking here about the cultural relationship of the board members, because the other
Yep.
thing, when you say getting the board members on the same page, you do not mean making the board like an automaton
No,
where everyone just
absolutely not.
agrees and we just go through the motion. You want conflict in board meetings, so long as it's good conflict, but you don't want people being unsure about what the term board means and
Yeah.
what being on a board or what their particular role means to stop them from being able to add that value.
And even giving people, whether new, returning, or very long standing on a board or committee, the permission, so to speak, to challenge other people and to just explain very openly from the outset that we have meetings to cause conflict, to create opportunity for people to disagree with one another through debate.
To take a good idea in,
Yep,
and spit a better idea out.
So don't be afraid to challenge others' ideas for the right reasons, like you say. But again, if someone is new to the volunteer management committee or board world altogether, unlike this guy who came from the world of rugby league, if someone's new to that environment, they're not necessarily going to understand that. And some people by nature are quite combative and are happy to be involved in conflict, but in my experience a lot of people don't like conflict either, and they're very happy to just sit in a committee meeting and agree with everybody else, even though there might be something that makes them uneasy about that decision. And if they've got the permission and are empowered to call other committee members out when they think that their ideas warrant challenging, then they're going to be far more likely to actually do that. So like you say, building the foundation levels of understanding across the board or committee, but also then talking openly about the reasons that we engage in the way that we engage as a board or committee, and just tackling those, what might be even subconscious in some cases, issues that hold people back or hamstring them from having the level of involvement that they otherwise could. Just get it on the table at the outset. And like I say, in our experience, people will reflect upon it through the year and say, far out, we are so much more efficient now, given that we all understand the way that we should be operating as a board or committee. And then there are some, really simple things that we've covered through plenty of podcast discussions, like acting with solidarity. Even if you disagree with the decision that a board takes, if you're a member of that board in public, whether, within the club or outside, you support that decision because you are part of that board that made that decision. You don't go out there and white ant and say, oh, the board decided this, but I disagree with it.
One other thing that I wanted to add to the discussion, Steve, you touched on going to the bank and making sure the ATO knows who they can talk to. One of the little things that sometimes gets missed is ringing up Telstra when you are the person that Telstra can talk to and saying, right, I'm now handing this job on to somebody else. Because it's like that can cause problems for years when you then find, because we don't have problems with our internet. We don't have problems with our phone until we do. But then when we do, and we've got to ring Telstra and say, hey, can you help us fix this problem? I can't even answer that question. Well, can you tell me who the right person that can? No, I can't even tell you that. And that's right, because again, that's their privacy protection. So that's fine. So don't let that happen. Cut it off by being proactive and making sure you catch all of those things. So look at every bill that you're paying and make sure that the current people have the authority to control those. So that's Telstra, energy provider, utilities provider, everyone across the board. Who are you getting a bill from? Who do you report to? Make sure you can talk to them. So that has been a really interesting discussion, Steve. And obviously we've both been through plenty of opportunities to see some basket cases in this area. So to wrap up, where do we suggest people go from here?
As I mentioned in one of my earlier rants, I think that the next step for clubs should obviously...
Lucky we don't get charged, in Monopoly when you stop on some square and you got to pay rent for being there. Lucky we don't have to pay rent for being on African soapboxes.
Oh dear, we'd be poor. We'd be very poor.
Yeah, but it'd be fun.
Yeah, so I think initial step is, if you don't already have the beginnings of an online repository, set about creating one. But importantly then, as I mentioned, we have a tool to which clubs can subscribe. And by doing so, we work collaboratively with them to build a series of online automated reminders that will prompt clubs when they need to do some of the really important things based on their unique calendar of events. So whether it be calling your AGM, submitting your annual return,
Ordering the jerseys for next year.
Ordering the jerseys, absolutely. Securing your sponsors so that you can order your jerseys. A lot of those really important things that people who've been doing those jobs forever just know need to happen at a certain time and innately remember to do them.
They often end up happening reactively, though, don't they? Rather than proactive. And then, oh, shit, we've got to have that done in 3 weeks. Quick.
Which then, you say, like you said earlier, means that you might not be able to take as strategic an approach as you probably should. So
things get done, but they don't necessarily get done really well.
That's right. Yeah. So give us a call, jump onto our website and contact us through there, reach out, and we will be very happy to talk with you about that offering and to build a tailored solution for your club to ensure that when it comes time for you to take a step back, you are supported by that systemized process, and you don't then need to be the one that has everything in your head that then, has to download to others when that time to walk away comes.
And it's more than just a calendar. This is a calendar that says, hey, it's time to do this. And here's what you need to know. And by the way, if you've forgotten how to do it, here's a little video. So it's a complete package. But then what's really beneficial is when we wrap that package up with the induction training. So look, if you've got people in your organizations who can do this and everyone hasn't cracked the shits and left at the same time and the outgoing committee are involved in that induction, that's fantastic. That's great. When you're looking for that external support, though, we have found it so helpful to be a third party, an independent third party, because when there is a hostile takeover and you've got factions on a board, as we said, so long as you can work together, that positive or constructive conflict is helpful in decision making. So it is often most helpful in those scenarios to have an independent third party in the room to run that induction, because it is that arm's length approach, and there's no baggage, there's no water under the bridge for us.
And we love it. We love the opportunity to come and work with volunteers, new and old, and to make their lives a little bit easier, and to answer some of those questions that people don't get the time to even give proper consideration to, because they're so hurriedly running around trying to get things done,
chasing
as
their
you
tail
say, at the last minute.
Yep. Steve, once again, this has been a fascinating and enjoying conversation. And if for all of our listeners who are not yet connected, there's probably not many of you not yet connected to us on social media or signed up to our newsletter, find us on our website, cprgroup.com.au, and obviously follow us on social media. Steve mentioned Meeting Track and Asset Track, and they are TRAC, which stands for Total Reporting and Control. So that's how you manage your assets, and it's how you manage your meetings. And so that's Asset Track, ASSETTRAC.com.au, or Meeting Track, MEETINGTRAC.com.au. Yeah, you can contact us with all of those things. You can even send us an email, but you know what? You can even pick up the phone. So you're very welcome to pick up the phone. And we even have a 1-800 number, don't we, Steve? So you can call us from all around the country. You can probably call us from Istanbul if you like. It might not make it through the first go.
Nor might it be free.
That's right. But that's 1-800-100-204. So Steve, thanks again for your time, and I look forward to another discussion about all things Basket Casey and Show Casey next time.
As always, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you on your soapbox.
Thank you. There's plenty of room up here for both of us. See ya.
Ciao.